Good morning and welcome to Counterpoints. Some difficulty traveling around Washington today has Emily and I broadcasting from home today. Emily, how is it in your neck of the city?
Well, DC doesn't handle snow very well, so it's about as you would expect. But it was a really beautiful, like sticky snow, so that's the benefit.
Indeed, there a little bit of potential rain coming. Otherwise, looking forward to some possible sledding after
Mm,
this.
good luck
But
with that, because it's going to freeze up quickly.
yeah, I know it's going to get ugly. But anyway, we're gonna start, of course, with Trump and Elon Musk holding a press conference with his boy from the Oval Office. We're going to move from there into the looming collapse of the ceasefire with Netanyahu and Trump threatening to end that and bring all hell back to Gaza in an effort to ethnically cleanse the strip and redevelop it into condos and produce a Riviera of the Middle East. We're also speaking of this rather blunt realpolitik. We'll also talk about Donald Trump saying that he has told the Ukrainians that he wants to be paid back for the U.S. investment in their war effort to the tune of $500 billion in rare earth minerals, and that they can reach a deal with Russia or not reach a deal with Russia. It's kind of, he doesn't really care. Meanwhile, Zelensky himself has kind of floated some land for land, peace proposal that could be a step forward. Tulsi Gabbard was supposed to be confirmed last night in the United States Senate, but because of the inclement weather here, they decided to postpone that until this morning. But she probably, by the time you're watching this, she may have gotten through and will be the director of national intelligence, barring some serious surprise. And then, Emily, you were able to bring in a couple of guests today, both of whom I think are going to be interesting. One of them you're doing a newsletter with. Am I right about that?
Yeah, we have two guests today. The second guest is Sohrab Ahmari. He's my colleague at Unheard. We did launch a new newsletter called Area 47 a couple weeks ago. So you can go to Unheard and look for Area 47, subscribe. It's
And
free
we can put that
subscription.
in the notes here too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good scoopy little details from inside Trump world. So we're working on that. But Sohrab is joining us today to talk about a really, really interesting story he wrote from the perspective of somebody on the right about the era of Elon Musk and MAGA world embracing Elon Musk and the various pitfalls that people don't seem to want to acknowledge. So we are happy to have him here so he can talk to us about that. The first guest that will be on the show is Lindsay Burke, who wrote the Project 2025 chapter on scaling down the Department of Education dramatically, which, just as we're coming here to discuss in this morning's show, is some of the biggest news in DC. Those plans are proceeding apace. So it's a very timely conversation we will get to have with Lindsay. A lot of her ideas are going to likely be implemented in the next few. I mean, with Elon, you could say the next few hours, honestly, but certainly the next few
Yeah, and
days,
they, and they
weeks, and
started
months.
last night. They were sounds like they were rifling through contracts at in the sixth floor of the Department of Education and canceled, I think, 89 of them, worth nearly $1 billion. That's on top of another roughly $100 million in like DEI contracts they've canceled, and they're signaling that the plan is to fully destroy the Department of Education. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from the author of this Project 2025, which the Trump campaign consistently told us had nothing to do with what he intended to do. Which you consistently warn people, no, this is what they're going to do.
I mean, we'll talk about it with Lindsay, but how can you, when someone puts years of time into building out a blueprint for reform or destruction,
Can't
not
let
end
that
up
work go to
using it?
waste, right?
Yeah, right. So we will make sure to talk to Lindsay about all of that, and big show. So we might as well dive in right here with our A block, which is all about the Oval Office conversation that Donald Trump and Elon Musk had with reporters late yesterday. We have have this clip here. I'm going to share my screen so that you can watch. This is Trump. Actually, I forgot one of the participants in this was Little X. And you'll see, if you're watching this, you're going to see Little X on Elon Musk's shoulders. He is a very cute kid. I don't think Grimes was particularly happy that he was there, though. So we'll roll this clip, and you can see Donald Trump talking about all kinds of different things.
And some of the things that we found, which are shocking, billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's very important. And that's one of the reasons I got elected. I said, we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt. And it seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. And we want to weed out the corruption. And it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. Well, so maybe we have to look at the judges, because that's a very serious, I think it's a very serious violation.
So that's Donald Trump going in on the federal judge. Obviously, there's a decent amount of debate right now on the right about whether Donald Trump should challenge or just disobey orders from the judiciary. And Trump yesterday said something that you just heard it there, but some people interpreted him saying, Ryan, I don't know if you caught this. At one point, he said basically like, we'll follow the judge, but we'll appeal. In this broader discussion, that like the context that he just gave could be interpreted a little bit differently than that too. Maybe they want to impeach the judge, which is a thing I believe you can do through the Senate. So sort of an interesting moment there with Trump.
Yeah, impeaching a judge over issuing a stay would be just an incredible break from 200 plus years of how we've been doing. To me, the level of dishonesty that's flowing from Trump in those comments is rather startling. He's not doing an audit. He's not just no judge would stop an executive, a Treasury Department, anybody from going through your spending, categorizing it, and trying to figure out whether there's waste, fraud, or abuse. No judge would ever stop that. What happened here is that they were sued because they were accused of giving this guy, what's his name, Elez, one of Elon Musk's DOGE officials, read and write access to the Treasury Department's most sensitive data. They initially denied that they had done so. The judge issued a stay, like, okay, stop. Like you can't be giving this guy all of this information right now. You need to come forward with a more reasonable plan that is within statutory guidelines, because there are laws around the safe access and holding of federal records. We now know from the federal government's, from Elon Musk and Trump's own filings, that they did actually give this guy write access. They're read and write access. So they're now saying that they're doing an examination to figure out whether or not he actually did anything with that. But he also had it on his own laptop that he was using. So this hacker kid had the ability to change the code inside the Treasury Department on his laptop. They're saying they don't think he did anything with that. I guess, but they already said that he didn't have that access. So now they've changed that story. So for a judge to come in and say, look, this is on hold until, what's Trump's famous phrase? Until we figure out what's going on.
What the hell is going on?
Until we figure out what the hell is going on, is not saying that you cannot audit federal spending, that you cannot hunt for fraud. And the other layer of dishonesty here is this kind of all shucks, like, I can't believe what we found. Like, I'm glad that 90% of the stuff that they're shutting down in USAID is being shut down when it comes to trying to intervene in foreign countries and basically being a vehicle for kind of the U.S. intelligence and U.S. military. Like, okay, you won't go after that if you want to go after that, but like this like pretense that they're stunned by what they're finding. Like I find that part difficult to believe. Like this was all publicly known stuff.
Right. Yes, that's absolutely true. Now, Elon obviously got a lot of questions, as people can imagine. Some questions are ones that it's been he actually, this is interesting. He actually really has not talked to the press a lot, as he's been like taking on the government, wildly taking on the government. And he finally actually did some Q&A. And I think it's actually pretty important to get some of these questions in front of him. So let's take a look at one of these moments with Elon. I'm going to share the screen again, just so that we can see how he responded to some of these very important questions.
This may seem like, well, aren't we in a democracy? Well, if you don't have a feedback loop, okay, we would have to, if you sorry. So, tell you, gravitas can be difficult sometimes. If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, if the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have?
Ryan, I want to say actually something interesting here is that he is trying to become the bureaucracy. It's kind of interesting to hear that from him, because he's also like, he's a special government employee, and bureaucracy is bureaucracy. It doesn't change just because it's a conservative bureaucracy.
Yeah, so he's a bureaucrat. Like
Yeah.
that is what he is. And what he is saying is he is the proper bureaucrat, that he is the one that, because he's there with Trump and people elected Trump, that he should be able to carry out the mission that people elected Trump to carry out. I have an enormous amount of sympathy for that general idea that like people should be able to vote for candidates, and those candidates should be able to enact policy. Obviously there have to be so the problem here is that that's not the system we have.
Right.
I kind of wish we did have that system, but we don't. What he's describing really is a parliamentary system where you would elect the kind of the MAGA party, and they would have a majority in parliament, and that they would appoint Trump to be prime minister, and then they would be able to carry out their agenda until there was a new election called. What we have is a system where we elect members of Congress, and we separately elect a president, and the members of Congress enact laws that the president either signs or vetoes. And if the president signs those laws, they're in place even after that president leaves office. Like, the laws don't go away when the president leaves office. And the congressional spending bills that have been enacted do not go away. That's why on March 14th, we will have a government shutdown if Congress does not agree to a new spending package and keep that going. What Musk is sort of suggesting here is that that shouldn't be the way it works, that the people elected Donald Trump, and Donald Trump will decide, how the government operates fully, which programs get funded, which programs don't get funded, and that March 14th, whatever Congress does or doesn't do, the government stays open. That is a system, and I think that there's real virtue in a system like that. That would actually, I think, be more democratic. In this, but at the same time, though, is Congress democratic? Like, is it part of a democracy or a democratic republic to have these two chambers where every 2 years in the House, candidates present ideas that they're going to enact when they're in Congress, and then you fight them out, and then 700,000 people or so go and vote for that person to be their representative in Washington, and that chamber passes laws, and then the Senate passes its laws. Like that's the system we have. And he doesn't like it because it's harder to just go in and just straight up do stuff. Because if you want to get rid of the Department of Education, for instance, you have to pass a law that it repeals the Department of Education. And he doesn't want to do that. As you know, that's what foiled Reagan, because Reagan had Democrats in controlling Congress at the time.
Well, this is the central argument among people like Russ Vogt, and Russ wrote a long essay about this in The American Mind in September of 2022. During the Tea Party years, you'll probably remember, Ryan, one of the big
And
sources
this
of
is the Trump's OMB director, so man right at the center of this revolution.
Right.
Go ahead.
And so that during the Tea Party years, one of the biggest sources of opposition to Barack Obama was that he was becoming an imperial president, that he was really expanding the powers of the executive. Russ disagrees with that common conservative critique and says, actually, the reason that we have this jumbled checks and balance off, like why is that off kilter? Well, it's because the executive has let a lot of his power over these agencies atrophy over the course of years, so that we've built up layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy. And this is something that Elon Musk definitely is buying into. It's something that Donald Trump himself is definitely buying into, and JD Vance is buying into. Where did you get that?
This is my wife's mug.
Amazing.
Although she didn't even end up voting for her in the end. But anyway, go ahead.
You just outed her. I've got a great Wisconsin mug actually right now. It's but anyway, that's the theory is that actually the executive needs to be much more muscular and flex over these executive agencies, so that what you don't have is career bureaucrats or people who've come through the revolving door, which is a real problem actually even for the left. You and I have talked about how that happens at the EPA, where you have, as one of many examples, you have people who came from energy companies and Exxon ending up in these jobs and making decisions that they weren't elected to make, that are helpful to their former employers. So all of that, there is a real argument. But it is, from the conservative perspective, sort of interesting because there is this split over whether the executive is too powerful or not powerful enough. And clearly, that's the position that Musk and everyone in the Trump administration is on the same page with now. It's just really different from where it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So we have more, and this time, actually, Elon Musk was answering. I thought these were some of the most useful questions. He's answering questions here about potential conflicts of interest, which is actually great to have him get on the record answering these questions. So here we go with Elon on that.
If you have received billions of dollars in contracts from the Pentagon, and the president's directing you to look into the Department of Defense, is that a conflict of interest?
Yes, we definitely need to do and are going to do at the president's request.
Does that present a conflict of interest for you?
No, because you'd have to look at the individual contract and say, first of all, I'm not the one, filing the contract. It's people at SpaceX or someone who will be putting for the contract. And I'd like to say, if you see any contract where where it was awarded to SpaceX and it wasn't by far the best value for money for the taxpayer, let me know, because every one of them was.
That may well be true. Let's take, but it doesn't really eliminate the question of conflicts of interest. Sort of a non sequitur there. Let's listen to his other answer on this topic.
The White House says that you will identify and excuse yourself from any conflicts of interest that you may have. Does that mean that you are in effect policing yourself? What are the checks and balances that are in place to ensure that there is accountability and transparency?
Well, we actually are trying to be as transparent as possible. In fact, we post our actions to the DOGE handle on X and to the DOGE website. So all of our actions are maximally transparent. In fact, I don't think there's been, I don't know of a case where an organization has been more transparent than the DOGE organization.
Right.
Okay.
So, he says there won't be a conflict of interest because SpaceX is the best. And
Right.
also that he's not the one putting in the requests. It's his employees who are doing so. If this is what people want, I guess this is what people can have.
Well, but it's also not in compliance with the special government, not to sound like a loser.
Yeah.
The special government employee jurisdiction, like the way that position is designed, obviously we know he's submitted this confidential conflict of interest report, but you're actually not supposed to have any relationship or any work that overlaps with your private portfolios. And this is overseen by the Attorney General, Department of Justice. So that's on Pam Bondi. And I doubt that there will be any attempt to rein Musk in, at least publicly, on that question. But he's totally out of compliance with definitely the spirit of that law. And that law is just sort of, it's just not designed for something like this. So the application of it is I don't know, Ryan. It's just so the whole thing. There's never been anybody in the history of the country. I mean this sincerely. Like even J.P. Morgan. Nobody has ever
Right.
had this level of power.
Right. Now, and certainly, imagine J.P. Morgan going into the White House, but remaining the head of his bank and going in and canceling contracts with his competitors.
I mean, he was kind of the treasurer while he was he was sort of the treasury secretary.
It was like he was like a Fed chair before there was a Fed.
Yeah. But then you also, in Musk's case, it's also tons of defense contracts. Like just the amount of contracts that his various businesses have with the government is unbelievable. So it's not even just it's not even just one issue area. It's like across the board.
Right. And so while Musk's team is in there just unilaterally canceling contracts, the American Prospect reported yesterday that, or maybe it was The Lever, one of those outlets reported that a brand new SpaceX contract was just paid out just this last week. So I think from the perspective of people who are having all of their contracts cut, to watch the guy who's doing the cutting continue to get contracts is a huge, like, wait a minute moment. And then if the answer is, well, look, it's a great contract, and the taxpayer is going to be very happy that they're funding. This was for research and development for SpaceX. It's a private company that has made him one of the richest, helped to make him one of the richest people on the planet. And the taxpayer is funding their research and development costs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's a great deal for the country. You could imagine a reverse Elon Musk doing a wow tweet, be like, wow, this private company that has made this man the richest person in the world is having its research and development funded by the taxpayer. Unbelievable fraud. And we found it, and you wouldn't have known about it without DOGE, and we are canceling that contract right now. They're like, oh, sorry, this is actually your contract. He's like, this is the best value for the taxpayer that you're ever going to get. And if you don't think so, you tell me and I'll deal with it.
I mean, if Zuckerberg had been doing this under a Biden administration.
Imagine we're paying for Meta's research and development.
Yeah.
He'd be like, wow, we're paying for Meta's research and development.
Yeah. Well, we have one more Elon clip to watch, and then we have some but we have some of Speaker Mike Johnson as well. So let's play this final Elon clip, and we will see what he had to say when asked about this.
Are people normally this quiet?
Your detractors, Mr. Musk.
I have to what?
Including a lot of Democrats.
I have detractors?
You do, sir.
I don't believe it.
Say that you're orchestrating a hostile takeover of government and doing it in a non-transparent way. What's your response to that criticism?
Well, first of all, you couldn't ask for a stronger mandate from the public. The public voted. We have a majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House. We won the Senate. The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what the people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for. And a lot of times, people that don't get what they voted for, but in this presidency, they are going to get what they voted for. And that's what democracy is all about.
So let's also now listen to Speaker Mike Johnson asked about J.D. Vance's recent comments saying that it's okay not to comply with a judge's order. And here's how Mike Johnson responded.
There have been more and more courts, federal judges, Republican and Democratic appointed judges have said that some of the Trump actions, early actions, we put a halt to them. J.D. Vance said that judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. You're a constitutional law expert. Ultimately, at the end, if the courts say that the administration is violating the law, should they comply with the court's demands?
Well, of course, the branches have to respect our constitutional order, but there's a lot of game yet to be played. Those will be appealed. We've got to go through the whole process. and we'll get to the final analysis. In the interim, I will say I agree wholeheartedly with Vice President J.D. Vance, my friend, because he's right. What they're doing in the executive branch, I've been asked so many times, aren't you uncomfortable with this? No, I'm not, because when Congress, for example, appropriates dollars for the executive branch to use, we build in, not only in the spirit of the law, but in the letter of the law, a broad amount of discretion for how that is used. There is a presupposition in America that the commander-in-chief is going to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars, that the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, is going to command those within his branch of government to do the right thing by the people, to be accountable, to not fund drag shows in Middle Eastern countries or South America, to not waste our taxpayer dollars. And that's what has been uncovered. And that's why we and the people are applauding what's happening right now in the new administration, because they've taken that seriously.
All right, and let's go ahead and take a look over here. So the Trump administration, as Kyle Cheney says, is asking an appeals court for an emergency order to permit it to reinstate limits on federal spending that it says were improperly blocked by a federal judge in Rhode Island, which they called, quote, intolerable judicial overreach. And Ryan, we may actually disagree on this. I thought
But
that
this,
judge was-
just as an
Go
update,
ahead,
this
yeah.
this circuit court has already rejected this appeal. And it was a 3-judge panel, 2 Biden appointees and an Obama appointee, so they kind of ran headlong into some partisan opponents. But the 3 judges said no, like give the district court time to work this out, and the stay remains in place. But go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say this was what was happening yesterday afternoon. The broader context for what Musk and Trump were talking about, and I think there's a pretty good argument that what the judge did was judicial overreach, which kind of kicked off this entire debate between Vance World, and people were curious how Mike Johnson would approach it, given that he does have a constitutional law background, and conservatives all came down, or I guess I should say, like Trump allies all came down on the side of not complying with the order, but then ultimately went through the appeals process. So I guess, I mean, I don't know if I should say ball's in their court, but if they want to just be out of compliance with it, the ball is in their court. It looks like they probably won't do that.
Right. I mean, J.D. Vance comparing it to a general on the battlefield seemed to me like a pretty huge stretch. Like Congress passes laws that prescribe what the federal government is able to do with some records and who's able to access them and what precautions have to be taken. And the judge argued that those laws appeared to be broken here, and that the executive needed to show cause that it was going to comply with the law. So that felt to me pretty standard and not kind of wildly outside. It did, like, I understand the point where, well, if you're even barring the Treasury Secretary from going down and like looking at these data, then that sounds crazy. But the judge did say that if that with pre-clearance, there could be access granted to any government officials that were in addition needed. The reason the pre-clearance was required here is because the judge, I think, felt like DOGE people were being dishonest, that they said that these kids did not have read and write access. That turned out to be false. It could be an innocent mistake, which is what they're trying to say it is, or it could be a lie that they told. But either way, what they said was false, and so there does and would then create the breaking of a law. And so for a judge to come in and say you gotta pause because you're breaking the law, to me doesn't seem like they're the ones creating a constitutional crisis.
Although there is this, I guess the other part of it is that the DOGE guys are now government employees, which makes it more complicated. And part of it is like, okay, so Elon is just throwing his like personal contractors at, like, I think that's how some people are seeing it. But I don't want to say carefully, but they did go through the process of getting them actually employed. So like, for example, I think Elez was actually an employee of the Treasury. Now he's at the State Department, right? Big balls. He's at the State Department now. So they are going through some of the official processes, which kind of complicates the question a little bit. Obviously, if they're out of compliance with the law, they're out of compliance with the law. But yeah, and I mean, we talked about this last week. Musk calls this a revolution. So it's like a very legal revolution. I don't know.
Yeah. And so, by the way, the other point that that JD Vance made in this tweet is that a judge would never tell a prosecutor, how to prosecute a case.
Mm-hmm.
JD Vance went to Yale Law School. And there's this joke about Yale Law School that they don't teach you the law there because it's all about becoming like basically a corporate CEO or something, or a politician, or a member of the deep state. The idea that I didn't go to law school, but the idea that a judge doesn't tell a prosecutor how to prosecute a case is absurd. Like judges are constantly throwing cases out, constantly telling a prosecutor that they don't have enough evidence to go forward with X, constantly telling them this charge actually doesn't fly. It's gone. So like all his examples there, when he gets out of the, like, you can't tell a general how to wage a battle. Like after that, everything is, suggests that he did not actually go to law school, which is strange because we know that he, for a fact, went to a very good one and is a very smart character.
Mm. Yeah, we just put this element up on the screen. It was confirmed that Elez now is at the State Department. So we also are keeping an eye on what I think, Ryan, might be one of the biggest trends that'll develop over the next, I don't know, like a week or so, probably over the course of the next year. Just depends on how all this happens. But CNN wrote a piece yesterday inside the GOP's careful pushback to Musk's DOGE effort, or doggy effort, as you refer to it. And one of the interesting parts of this is, so here's Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska. He's saying, instead of getting rid of everything, let's look at it selectively. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And he says he supports shutting down the CFPB, for example, that Trump can't ultimately usurp Congress. And obviously, Congress established the CFPB, which creates quite a dynamic for constitutional conservatives. But there were years spent kind of developing a plan for this muscular executive takeover. And Ryan, the thing I find very interesting is in the House of Representatives, particularly, we saw some of this from Katie Britt in Alabama. The broad government reform DOGE mission is very popular with red state voters, of course. And so are you going to end up looking like, I don't know. I mean, do you end up looking sort of silly, foolish, selfish if you're Don Bacon? And maybe for Bacon in Nebraska, this is USAID sending a bunch of American grown farm products to different parts of the world. You have to answer that question.
Yeah, a major thing that USAID does is, as Samantha Power, said just a couple days ago, the former director of it, is it tries to open markets for American corporations. Mm-hmm. Because it's getting so much pressure, like you're finally having people talk a little bit more honestly about what it does. Moving on from USAID, we're just helping, feed and give food and medicine to the needy. It's like, no, okay, now we actually have to justify what we're doing. Let's be more honest about what we're doing. And one of the things they do, is they work on behalf of American corporations, and agribusiness would be at the very top of that. The last Trump administration saw a trade war lead to a collapse in soybean prices for the Midwest, which have never recovered. And so one of USAID's jobs is to go in and find places where the U.S. agribusiness can sell its product. And so I'm sure that's part of what Bacon is talking about there. Yeah, and otherwise, in the other place, he says, look, all right, you don't like this spending, let's redirect it, but let's do it the constitutional way. Feels quaint. Let's pass a law and do it. He's like, his argument is that there's still a law. And yes, I feel silly. In the face of a revolution,
right,
talking about process.
Right.
Because this is what's going on. It's a revolution. And here's these hall monitors talking about the law. We happen to have had this Constitution in place for 250 years. So it's kind of a big deal. And I've been told my whole life that it's a big deal. And I apparently it's not.
Well, but this is the thing with the Don Bacons of the world is it's going to become a challenge to stay consistent on wanting this quote revolution. And then when the revolution hits your district, you say, well, we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Give us carve outs that make sense. And I say carve outs in a pejorative sense because I think, in that case, it's easy to support revolution when it doesn't affect your district or your constituents, but it's really going to test the commitment to the quote unquote revolution when it does actually come home. One more point before we take off here for this block. It looks like big balls. He launched, as this reporter says, a privacy-focused image sharing site in 2021 that allowed users to create custom URLs. The URLs that redirected to Corsatine's site, that's Edward Big Balls Corsatine, referenced the sale of child sexual abuse material, racial slurs, and rape. Ryan, I didn't quite know what to make about this story, to be honest, because I don't necessarily oppose creating different tools like this, and we're reading into possible motives here in a way that I'm, as crazy as the whole big balls thing is, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but what did you make of this?
So what makes this to me so shocking is that it is specifically focused on encrypting images. It specifically has been used by people who've abused that in the way that you would expect a site like that to be abused. And I do a lot of work that requires, encrypting our communications so that, sources are able to communicate with journalists and not be discovered by authoritarian regimes who would, then torture and kill them. And so encryption and privacy are very valuable things. If you have a document that you are trying to encrypt and keep secret from these authoritarian regimes, you have multiple options. You can put it on an encrypted thumb drive. You can put it on a laptop that is disconnected from the internet, or you can put it and you can put that in a safe. There are pretty solid things you can do to protect your documents and keep them encrypted and safe from those kinds of prying eyes. But notice the characteristic that you still have when you're doing that. You are in possession of those documents / images at that point. I don't mind that because I'm not doing anything illegal. A journalist is allowed to be in possession of classified or secret documents. That is well within the law. You are not allowed to be in possession of other certain images, which we're not even going to talk about here. Therefore, the regime that I just laid out of protecting the documents would not actually be sufficient if your motivation was to protect you from the legal implications of possessing those kinds of images. What you would need is some encrypted way to hold them somewhere else on a different server that you would still have access to, but that could then not be connected back to you. And that is precisely what Mr. Balls has designed here. And if he did it accidentally and just happened to be the perfect vehicle for this type of exploitative imagery to be possessed but not possessed by perverts who should be in prison, then somebody should have told him, hey, you know what? It looks like what you're designing is specifically to be used for these types of people. And it's a crime and you should be in prison for it. Or he designed it this way on purpose. Those are the only two options.
Well, and what's crazy is, so he's 19 now, I believe, and if this was 2021, you can do the math. This kid was in his smack in the middle of his teenage years creating, which I'm sure defenders will say because he's a brilliant young mind, and that's the type of person you want to bring into the government. But obviously, that it's insane that you even have that level of power on our current internet when you're that age potentially.
Yeah.
So, lots of news to talk about in the Middle East. So let's move on to that.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.